I'm Bella, 27 years old. The words street garbage in a borrowed dress are still echoing in my head 3 hours later. Victoria Hammond said them loud enough for every single person at her Christmas party to hear. The entire room went silent, 40 pairs of eyes staring at me like I was some kind of circus freak. Then I looked her straight in the eye and said just 5 words that changed everything. Where are you watching from today? Drop your location in the comments below and hit that like and subscribe button if you've ever felt completely humiliated by someone who thought they were better than you. You'll definitely want to stick around for what happened next. Let me back up and tell you how I ended up in that nightmare. 8 months ago, I thought I'd won the lottery when I met Ryan Hammond at a coffee shop downtown. He was everything I'd dreamed of. Tall, handsome, successful architect from one of Portland's oldest families. When he asked me out, I couldn't believe someone like him would notice someone like me. I should have known something was off when he insisted on picking me up for our first date instead of meeting somewhere. He pulled up to my apartment complex in his Tesla, took one look at the building, and his face changed. Not dramatically, just this tiny shift that I almost missed. "This is cozy," he said, trying to sound positive. I told him it wasn't much, but it was home. He smiled, but it seemed forced. Our second date was at this upscale Italian place where the appetizers cost more than I usually spent on dinner. Ryan ordered wine like he was auditioning for a sommelier position, discussing tannins and terroir with our server. When I said the house red sounded fine, I caught him exchanging a look with the waiter that made my cheeks burn. 4 months in, Ryan started making subtle suggestions about my appearance. Nothing cruel, just helpful observations about how certain colors made me look more sophisticated, or how different hairstyles might complement my features better. He offered to take me shopping, which should have been sweet, except he kept steering me toward boutiques where a single blouse cost more than my monthly groceries. The real warning signs started around month 6. Ryan began canceling plans last minute for family obligations I was never invited to join. When I asked about meeting his parents, he'd deflect with vague promises about when the timing is right. I started to suspect I was his secret girlfriend, hidden away from the parts of his life that really mattered. But when he was present, Ryan was wonderful. He'd surprise me with flowers, plan romantic dinners, and make me feel like the center of his universe. He had this way of making ordinary moments feel magical. A random Tuesday would become special because he'd bring takeout from my favorite restaurant and we'd watch old movies on my couch. That's when he finally mentioned his mother's annual Christmas party. "It's this huge event Mom throws every year," he said one evening while we were making dinner in my tiny kitchen. "Portland's who's who, family friends, business associates. Very formal, very traditional." I waited for the invitation that felt like it was coming. "The thing is," Ryan continued, not meeting my eyes, "it can be pretty overwhelming. Lots of politics, social dynamics, that sort of thing. Mom gets really stressed about everything being perfect." "It sounds important to you," I said carefully. "It is. I mean, it's important to Mom. These relationships matter for my firm, for the family reputation." He paused, finally looking at me. "I was thinking maybe this year I'd skip it. We could do our own thing, just the two of us." Something in his tone made my heart sink. He wasn't planning to skip it. He was planning to go without me. The message was clear. I wasn't ready for prime time in the Hammond family social circle. "Ryan," I said slowly, "are you ashamed of me?" "What? No, of course not." But he said it too quickly, too defensively. "It's just complicated with my family. They have certain expectations, certain ways of doing things." "What kind of expectations?" Ryan ran his hands through his hair, clearly uncomfortable. "They're very traditional. Old Portland society, you know? They care about things like family background, education, social connections. It's not that you're not amazing, you are. It's just that they might not see that right away." I felt something cold settle in my stomach. "So you think I'm not good enough for your family?" "I think my family isn't good enough for you," Ryan said, which should have been sweet but felt like a deflection. "I just don't want you to have to deal with their judgment." That night, after Ryan left, I sat in my apartment thinking about what he'd really said. His family had certain expectations, and I didn't meet them. He was protecting me from their judgment, but he was also protecting them from having to associate with someone beneath their social status. I called my best friend Maya, who'd been watching this relationship with growing concern. "He doesn't want to take you to his family's Christmas party?" she said, her voice rising. "Bella, you've been together 8 months. That's not protecting you, that's hiding you." Deep down, I knew she was right. But I wasn't ready to give up yet. I'd fallen for Ryan, invested so much emotional energy in this relationship. There had to be a way to prove to his family that I was worthy of their son. Over the next week, I found myself researching the Hammond family online. Old Portland money, real estate dynasty going back 3 generations. Victoria Hammond sat on multiple charity boards and was frequently photographed at high society events. Ryan's father had been a prominent city councilman before his death 5 years earlier. These people lived in a different world than I did. But that didn't mean I couldn't learn to navigate it. I started practicing conversations about art and politics, reading up on local cultural events, even watching YouTube videos about wine appreciation and fine dining etiquette. Maybe if I could prove I belonged in their world, Ryan would stop being ashamed to bring me into it. Maybe I could earn their acceptance and his pride. I had no idea I was about to walk into a trap I'd helped set for myself. The opportunity I'd been waiting for came 3 weeks before Christmas, in the form of a charity auction at the Portland Art Museum. Maya spotted the event listing online, an elegant fundraiser for arts education, exactly the kind of cause Victoria Hammond would support. More importantly, it was open to the public with tickets starting at just $50. This could be perfect, Maya said as we looked through the event details. You could show up, demonstrate your interest in important causes, maybe even meet some of the same people who'll be at the Christmas party. The plan felt slightly desperate, but I was past caring about pride. I bought a ticket, chose my most sophisticated outfit, and spent hours researching the featured artists and the education programs we'd be supporting. If I was going to infiltrate Portland's cultural elite, I'd be prepared. The museum was transformed for the evening, with soft lighting highlighting both the permanent collection and the auction items. I arrived fashionably late, surveying the room for familiar faces from my online research. The crowd was exactly what I'd expected. Well-dressed, well-educated, well-connected people who moved through the space with the confidence that comes from never questioning whether you belong. I recognized Victoria Hammond immediately. She stood near the silent auction display, elegant in a black cocktail dress that probably cost more than my monthly rent. Her silver hair was perfectly styled, and she held court among a group of women who looked like they'd stepped from the society pages. Taking a deep breath, I approached the auction table where Victoria was examining a weekend getaway package. This was my chance to make a good first impression, to show her I was more than whatever preconceptions she might have about her son's mysterious girlfriend. The Willamette Valley package looks wonderful, I said, gesturing to the wine country retreat listing. I've heard the vineyards there are producing some really exceptional Pinot Noirs. Victoria turned, her eyes taking in my appearance with the swift assessment I'd expected. Yes, the terroir is quite special, she agreed. Are you familiar with Oregon wines? I'm learning, I said honestly. I work in healthcare, but I'm passionate about supporting local agriculture and cultural programs like this one. Healthcare, Victoria repeated, and I caught something shift in her expression. How interesting. What area? I'm a dental hygienist. I work with a practice that serves families across economic backgrounds. It's rewarding work. There's something special about helping people feel confident about their smiles. I'd practiced this introduction, emphasizing the meaningful aspects of my job while avoiding anything that might sound defensive about my working-class profession. How noble, Victoria said, and I couldn't tell if she meant it sincerely or sarcastically. And you're here alone tonight? This was the moment of truth. Actually, I'm here because I believe in the cause. Arts education changed my life when I was younger. Community programs kept me engaged in school when my family was going through difficult times. It was true, and I hoped the personal touch might resonate with her charitable interests. Victoria nodded thoughtfully, and for a moment I felt like I might be making progress. I'm Victoria Hammond, she said, extending her hand. Bella Collins, I replied, shaking her hand with what I hoped was appropriate confidence. It's wonderful to meet you, Mrs. Hammond. Her eyes sharpened slightly at my name, and I wondered if Ryan had mentioned me. Collins, she repeated. That's familiar somehow. Before I could respond, one of her friends interrupted with a question about auction logistics, and I stepped back to give them space. But I'd made contact, established myself as someone who cared about the same causes Victoria supported. The rest of the evening went better than I'd hoped. I bid on a few smaller items, participated in conversations about local cultural venues, and generally felt like I was holding my own among Portland's philanthropic set. When Victoria passed me later near the wine bar, she even smiled and asked how I was enjoying the event. It's been wonderful, I said. The museum does such important work in the community. Indeed they do. Perhaps I'll see you at future events, Victoria said pleasantly before moving on. Driving home, I felt cautiously optimistic. Victoria had been polite, even friendly. She'd seen me in an appropriate social setting, engaging with causes she cared about, demonstrating that I could fit into their world. Maybe this could work after all. When I told Ryan about the encounter the next day, his reaction was harder to read than I'd expected. You went to Mom's charity event? He said, something strange in his voice. Not her event specifically. It was a museum fundraiser. But yes, I met her there. She seemed nice. Ryan was quiet for a long moment. What did you talk about? Just general conversation. The auction, local culture, my work. Nothing dramatic. I studied his expression. She was perfectly pleasant. Ryan, I don't understand why you were so worried about me meeting her. I wasn't worried exactly, he said, but he looked uncomfortable. It's just that Mom can be particular about new people in our social circle. She likes to know everything about everyone. What does that mean? Nothing specific. Nothing. She's just very protective of the family reputation. Sometimes she does research on people we're dating, asks around about backgrounds and families. It's not personal. It's how she's always been. Something cold crept up my spine. Research? Basic stuff. Where you work, where you went to school, what your family does. She did the same thing when my sister brought her college boyfriend home. Ryan reached for my hand. Don't worry about it. She seemed to like you, right? I nodded, but unease was settling in my stomach. The idea of Victoria Hammond investigating my background felt invasive and wrong. What was she looking for? What was she afraid she'd find? That evening, Maya called with an update on her own online stalking of the Hammond family. I found the guest list from last year's Christmas party, she said. It was in some society blog coverage. Bella, these people are serious Portland royalty. City council members, federal judges, CEOs, old timber money families. Okay, so they're well connected. I knew that. Right, but look at the women in the photos. They're all a certain type. Similar backgrounds, similar education, similar families. There's definitely a pattern. I looked through the photos Maya had sent me. She was right. Ryan's previous girlfriends, the women in his social circle, they all had something I didn't. Not just money, though that was part of it. They had the kind of polished confidence that came from never questioning whether you belonged in those rooms. Maya, do you think I'm making a mistake trying to fit into this world? I think you shouldn't have to fit into anything, she said firmly. The right person accepts you as you are, family included. But if you're determined to try this, at least go in with your eyes open. 2 weeks later, the invitation arrived. Not a phone call or casual suggestion, but an actual engraved invitation addressed to Miss Bella Collins in elegant calligraphy. The Christmas party invitation felt like validation. I'd passed some kind of test at the museum event. Ryan seemed surprised when I showed him the invitation. She invited you directly? Is that unusual? No, it's just, she usually goes through me for these things. He studied the invitation. This is good, Bella. She must have been impressed when she met you. Have you ever experienced that feeling when something you've been hoping for finally happens, but it doesn't feel quite right? That was me, holding that beautiful invitation, wondering why victory felt so much like walking into a trap. The 3 weeks between receiving the invitation and the actual party were a blur of preparation that bordered on obsession. I was determined to look perfect, act perfectly, and prove once and for all that I belonged in Ryan's world. First came the dress shopping. I spent entire weekends visiting boutiques across Portland, looking for something that would make the right impression. Everything that looked appropriate for a Hammond family Christmas party cost more than I made in a month. I was about to settle for something cheaper that didn't quite fit the occasion when I discovered a consignment shop in the Pearl District. The shop specialized in designer pieces, and buried between the Chanel suits and Armani gowns, I found it. A midnight blue cocktail dress that was absolutely perfect. The label was one I recognized from fashion magazines, and the price, while still significant for my budget, was manageable if I skipped a few other expenses. The dress fit like it had been tailored for me. The deep blue brought out my eyes. The cut was sophisticated without being revealing, and the fabric had a subtle shimmer that caught the light beautifully. When I looked in the fitting room mirror, I barely recognized myself. That dress was meant for you, the sales associate said when I emerged. It's barely been worn. The previous owner only used it for one event. I handed over my credit card, trying not to think about how long it would take me to pay off this single purchase. This was an investment in my future with Ryan, I told myself. If this party went well, it would be worth every penny. Next came accessories and shoes, borrowed from Maya and her more fashion-forward friends. I practiced walking in heels until I could glide across a room without wobbling, and I spent my lunch breaks watching YouTube tutorials on elegant hairstyles and makeup techniques. But the real preparation was mental. I researched current events, local politics, and cultural topics that might come up in conversation. I memorized wine terminology and practiced discussing art and literature. I was ready for any topic Victoria's social circle might throw at me. Ryan noticed my intense preparation and seemed both impressed and concerned. You know you don't have to perform for them, right? He said one evening as I practiced small talk scenarios out loud. Just be yourself. Myself got you to suggest skipping the party entirely, I reminded him. Maybe myself needs some improvement. That's not what I meant, Ryan said, but he didn't argue further. The night of the party, I spent 2 hours getting ready. The professional blowout made my hair fall in perfect waves, my makeup looked flawless, and the dress was everything I'd hoped it would be. When I looked in the mirror, I saw someone who could absolutely belong at a Hammond family Christmas party. Ryan picked me up in his best suit, and his reaction when he saw me was everything I'd hoped for. "Wow," he said, staring at me like he was seeing me for the first time. "Bella, you look incredible." "Thank you," I said, feeling more confident than I had in months. "Ready to show me off to your family?" Something flickered across Ryan's face. Surprise? Maybe. Or concern. "Of course," he said, but there was something in his tone I couldn't identify. The Hammond house was exactly what I'd expected from my online research. A massive Tudor revival in the West Hills, lit up like something from a Christmas movie. The circular driveway was lined with luxury cars, and every window glowed with warm, inviting light. We were greeted at the door by a woman in black who took our coats, and immediately I could hear the sounds of a successful party. Laughter, conversation, the clink of crystal glasses. Ryan took my arm and guided me toward the main living room. The room was spectacular. A Christmas tree that must have been 12 feet tall dominated one corner, decorated with what looked like genuine antique ornaments. Garland draped elegantly over the fireplace, and everywhere I looked, people in expensive clothes moved gracefully through the space with champagne glasses and confident smiles. For the first hour, everything went perfectly. Ryan introduced me to various family friends and business associates, and I held my own in conversations about local restaurants, recent museum exhibitions, and Portland's cultural scene. People seemed genuinely interested in my work, asking thoughtful questions about dental health and community healthcare. "You have such an interesting perspective," said Mrs. Whitman, the wife of a prominent attorney. "I never really considered the connection between oral health and overall well-being." I was relaxing, feeling like I'd worried about nothing. These weren't the monsters I'd built up in my imagination. They were just people. Sophisticated people, but people nonetheless. Maybe Ryan had been overthinking his family's expectations. Around 9 o'clock, I noticed people starting to gather in the main room. Victoria appeared at the top of the grand staircase wearing a stunning emerald dress that probably cost more than I made in 3 months. She looked radiant, every inch the society matriarch holding court in her own domain. She tapped her crystal glass with a silver fork, and gradually the room fell silent. "Friends," she began, her voice carrying easily through the space. "Thank you all for being here tonight. This party has always been special to me because it brings together the people who matter most to our family and our community." I smiled, feeling included in that description. This was going better than I'd ever imagined. "As many of you know," Victoria continued, "Ryan has been dating someone new, and many of you have had the pleasure of meeting her tonight." She paused, scanning the room until her eyes found mine. "Bella, would you come forward so everyone can see you properly?" My heart started racing, but it felt good, like I was finally getting the recognition and acceptance I'd been working toward. This was it, the moment when Victoria would officially welcome me into the family in front of all their friends. I walked toward the center of the room, smiling at the faces turning to look at me. People seemed friendly, interested, welcoming. Victoria moved to stand beside me, and I could smell her expensive perfume. "I wanted everyone to meet Bella," she said warmly. "She works in healthcare and has been working so hard to make a good impression on our family." Something in the way she said "working so hard" made my smile falter slightly, but I maintained my composure. "In fact," Victoria continued, "Bella has gone to extraordinary lengths to fit in with our social circle. She even attended the museum fundraiser a few weeks ago, which showed real initiative." The room was completely quiet now, and I began to sense something shifting in the atmosphere. "She's wearing a beautiful dress tonight," Victoria said, reaching out to touch the fabric of my sleeve. "It really is stunning, isn't it? The color, the cut, the quality of the material." I nodded, uncertain where this was going but beginning to feel uncomfortable. Victoria smiled at me, and suddenly it looked exactly like the expression a cat might wear while playing with a mouse. "I have to confess, I have a particular appreciation for this dress. You see, I wore it to a gala last spring, and then donated it to the very consignment shop where Bella found it." The words hit me like a physical blow. The room was silent except for the grandfather clock ticking in the hallway. I was wearing Victoria Hammond's cast-off dress to her Christmas party, and she'd just announced it to everyone present, but she wasn't finished. "I think it's admirable when people make the best of their circumstances," Victoria continued, her voice dripping with false compassion. "When you come from modest means, you have to be creative about how you present yourself in society. Of course, no matter how much effort you put into the appearance, authenticity always shows through in the end." I stood there frozen, as 40 pairs of eyes stared at me with expressions ranging from pity to amusement to secondhand embarrassment. Then Victoria delivered the final blow. I suppose some people are just naturally suited for certain social circles, while others, well, you can dress up street garbage all you want, but it's still just street garbage in a borrowed dress. The silence that followed was deafening. That's when something inside me finally snapped. The moment Victoria's words hung in the air, I felt something shift inside me. Not the crushing shame I'd expected, but something colder and sharper. 40 pairs of eyes were staring at me, waiting to see if I'd crumble or flee. Victoria stood there with that triumphant smile, savoring what she clearly thought was my complete destruction. Instead, I looked her directly in the eye and said 5 words that made the entire room gasp. "Your son agrees with you." The color drained from Victoria's face. Ryan, who'd been standing near the kitchen doorway, went rigid. The whispers started immediately, a low buzz of shock and confusion as people tried to process what I'd just said. But I wasn't done. The humiliation had broken something inside me, but it had also freed me from caring about their approval. "You want to talk about authenticity, Victoria?" I said, my voice carrying clearly through the silent room. "Let's talk about what kind of family raises a man who's so ashamed of someone he claims to care about that he suggests skipping Christmas dinner rather than bringing her home." Victoria's mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air. "I don't know what you're talking about." "Really?" I turned to address the room, these people who'd been watching my humiliation like dinner theater. Did everyone here know that Ryan originally planned to skip this party entirely rather than bring me? That he told me his family's gatherings were too overwhelming, too stressful for someone like me? I could see understanding dawning on several faces. The whispers grew louder as people began to piece together what had really been happening. "But then you invited me personally at the museum, didn't you, Victoria? After that pleasant conversation about art and community service. Why do you think that was?" Victoria was struggling to maintain her composure. "I simply thought you might enjoy— You thought you might enjoy this," I interrupted, gesturing to the scene around us. The setup, the borrowed dress revelation, the public humiliation. This was all planned, wasn't it? I could see Ryan trying to move toward me, probably to stop this before it got worse. But people were blocking his path as they pressed forward to hear better. "You see," I continued, my voice getting stronger with every word, "while Victoria was planning this little performance, she made one mistake. She underestimated me." I reached into my purse and pulled out my phone. Ryan has been texting his sister all week, worried about tonight, asking if the plan was still on track, whether this was really the best way to handle what he called the Bella situation. This was a calculated bluff, but I could see from Ryan's expression that I'd hit close enough to the truth to matter. "Here's what I find interesting," I said, putting my phone away. "Victoria went through all this trouble to prove I don't belong in your world. But looking around this room right now, seeing the way people are staring at you instead of me, I'm starting to think maybe your world isn't as civilized as you pretend it is." Mrs. Whitman, who'd been so kind to me earlier, was staring at Victoria with an expression of horror. Several other guests looked deeply uncomfortable with what they'd just witnessed. "That's enough," Ryan finally found his voice, pushing through the crowd toward me. "Bella, stop this. You're making things worse." I laughed, and the sound was sharp enough to make several people flinch. "I'm making things worse? Ryan, your mother just called me garbage in front of 40 people, and I'm the one making things worse?" "She didn't mean it like that," Ryan said weakly, but even he didn't sound convinced. "How did she mean it then?" I challenged. "Please enlighten all of us about the appropriate interpretation of being called street garbage at a Christmas party." Ryan opened his mouth, but no words came out. He looked around the room at all the faces watching him, waiting for him to defend either his mother or his girlfriend, and I could see him realize there was no good choice. That's when I understood the final truth about Ryan Hammond and his entire family. They weren't just snobs. They were cowards. They could dish out cruelty as long as it was packaged in politeness and social propriety, but the moment someone fought back, they fell apart. "You know what, Ryan?" I said, pulling off the bracelet he'd given me for our 6-month anniversary and setting it on the nearest table. "Your mother did me a favor tonight. She showed me exactly what kind of man you really are, and exactly what kind of family I would have been trying to join." I looked around the room one last time, at all these people who'd watched my planned humiliation like it was entertainment. "Mrs. Whitman," I said, addressing the woman who'd been genuinely kind to me earlier, "thank you for the lovely conversation about healthcare. It meant more than you know." Then I turned to Victoria, who looked like she'd been struck by lightning. "And Victoria? Next time you want to destroy someone, you might want to make sure they don't have more dignity than your entire social circle combined." As I walked toward the door, I heard Victoria's voice behind me, shrill and desperate. Bella, wait. I think there's been a misunderstanding. I didn't turn around. But I did pause at the door long enough to say, loud enough for everyone to hear. The only misunderstanding was mine. I actually thought you people were worth impressing. The cold December air hit my face as I stepped outside, and I realized I was crying. Not tears of sadness. Tears of pure, furious relief. I'd spent 8 months trying to become someone else for people who'd never had any intention of accepting me, but I'd found my voice tonight. I'd stood up for myself in a way I never had before, and for the first time since I'd met Ryan Hammond, I felt like myself again. My phone started buzzing before I'd even reached the street. Ryan. I declined the call and immediately got another one, then another. By the time I reached my car, I had 4 missed calls and 7 text messages. I drove home in silence, still wearing Victoria's cast-off dress, but somehow feeling more authentically myself than I had in months. I didn't make it home before the adrenaline crash hit. I had to pull over in a grocery store parking lot because my hands were shaking too badly to drive safely. The reality of what had just happened was settling in, and it felt overwhelming. I'd just publicly confronted one of Portland's most prominent society families. I'd humiliated Ryan in front of his professional network. I'd probably burned bridges with half the city's cultural elite, and despite all of that, I felt free. My phone kept buzzing with calls and texts from Ryan. I finally looked at the messages. Bella, please answer your phone. We need to talk. That wasn't supposed to happen like that. You don't understand the whole situation. My mother is devastated. She never meant to hurt you. Please come back. We can fix this. The last message was the one that made me laugh out loud. I love you. Don't let one bad night ruin what we have. One bad night. As if this was some kind of accident instead of a carefully orchestrated public execution of my dignity. I turned off my phone and sat in that parking lot for 20 minutes, processing what had just happened. Yes, I'd been humiliated. Victoria had succeeded in making me look like a fool in front of Portland's social elite. But something else had happened too. I'd fought back. For the first time in our entire relationship, I'd stopped trying to prove I was worthy and instead demanded that they prove they were worthy of me. And they'd failed spectacularly. The drive home gave me time to think about everything that had led to this moment. 8 months of changing myself, apologizing for who I was, spending money I didn't have, all to win the approval of people who'd been setting me up for this humiliation from the beginning. When I got back to my apartment, I did something I should have done months ago. I took off that beautiful, expensive dress, Victoria's cast-off dress, and put on my most comfortable pajamas. Then I made a cup of tea and called Maya. "Oh my God," she said after I'd told her the whole story. "Bella, I'm so sorry. That's absolutely horrible." It was horrible, I agreed. But you know what? It was also clarifying. I spent 8 months trying to become someone I'm not for people who were never going to accept me anyway. At least now I know where I stand. Are you okay, though? Really okay? I considered the question seriously. Was I okay? I'd been publicly humiliated, my relationship was clearly over, and I'd probably become persona non grata in Portland's social circles. But for the first time in months, I felt like myself again. "I'm better than okay," I told her. "I'm free." My phone, which I'd finally turned back on, buzzed with another call from Ryan. I declined it, and then did something I should have done weeks ago. I blocked his number. The next morning brought an unexpected call at my dental office. Mrs. Whitman, the woman from the party who'd been so kind to me. "Bella, dear," she said, "I hope you don't mind me tracking you down, but I wanted to apologize for what happened last night. What Victoria did was inexcusable." "Thank you," I said, genuinely touched. "That means a lot coming from you. I also wanted you to know that you weren't the only one who left early. About half the party cleared out within 30 minutes of your confrontation. People were quite disturbed by the whole orchestrated nature of it. That information made me feel vindicated in a way I hadn't expected. Maybe I hadn't just made myself look foolish. Maybe I'd shown some of these people something true about Victoria Hammond and her family. There's something else," Mrs. Whitman continued. "I sit on the board of a community health clinic that serves low-income families. We're always looking for qualified dental hygienists who understand the importance of treating people with dignity, regardless of their economic status. Would you be interested in hearing more?" The irony was almost perfect. Victoria's attempt to destroy me by highlighting my working-class background had connected me with someone who valued exactly that perspective. Over the next few days, I heard different versions of the Christmas party story spreading through Portland's social networks. Some painted me as a vindictive social climber who'd attacked a gracious hostess. Others portrayed me as a victim who'd finally fought back against systematic cruelty. But the version that mattered most was the one I told myself. I was someone who'd discovered her own worth and refused to let anyone diminish it. A week after the party, I found an envelope slipped under my apartment door. The expensive stationery made it clear who'd sent it before I even opened it. "Dear Bella," Victoria had written in perfect penmanship, "I hope we can move past the unfortunate events at our Christmas gathering. I believe there were some misunderstandings about intentions, and I hate to think that hurt feelings have caused such discord. Perhaps we could meet for coffee and discuss this like reasonable adults." I read the letter twice, marveling at her ability to rewrite history even in private correspondence. Unfortunate events, misunderstandings about intentions, as if I'd imagined the entire setup, the public humiliation, the calculated cruelty. I threw the letter away without responding. 3 days later, Ryan showed up at my apartment building. I saw him from my window, pacing in front of the entrance like he was trying to work up the courage to buzz my unit. I watched him for 15 minutes, remembering how my heart used to race when I saw him, how his presence used to make everything seem brighter. Now I felt nothing. Not anger, not sadness, not love, just a kind of distant curiosity about what he thought he could possibly say that would matter. I never buzzed him up. After an hour, he left. 2 weeks later, Mrs. Whitman called with details about the community clinic position. The work sounded meaningful, providing dental care to families who couldn't afford private practice fees, working with people who'd been dismissed by other healthcare providers. The pay was comparable to my current job, but the mission felt more important. "We serve a lot of families who've been made to feel unwelcome in traditional healthcare settings," Mrs. Whitman explained. "People who've been judged for their circumstances rather than treated with respect. Your experience might help you connect with patients who need advocates." The job offer felt like validation that Victoria's cruelty had backfired completely. Instead of destroying me, she'd connected me with work that would actually make a difference in people's lives. I gave my notice at the dental practice where I'd been working, accepted Mrs. Whitman's offer, and started planning the next phase of my life. A phase built on helping people rather than impressing them, on authentic relationships rather than social climbing, on being valued for who I was rather than apologizing for who I wasn't. The funny thing was, I was actually grateful to Victoria Hammond, not for the cruelty that was unforgivable, but for the clarity. Her Christmas party performance had forced me to confront some uncomfortable truths about the relationship I'd been settling for and the person I'd been pretending to be. Sometimes the worst thing that happens to you turns out to be exactly what you needed to save yourself from a life that would never have made you happy. 3 months after Victoria's Christmas party, I was settling into my new position at the Eastside Community Health Clinic when the first crack appeared in the Hammond family facade. Maya called me during my lunch break, practically vibrating with excitement. "Bella, you have to hear this," she said. "My neighbor works at the same architectural firm as Ryan, and apparently he's been struggling since your breakup. Missing deadlines, distracted in meetings, the whole thing." I should have felt vindicated, but mostly I just felt tired. "That's unfortunate, but it's not my problem anymore." "Wait, there's more," Maya continued. "Apparently Victoria has been calling the firm, trying to help Ryan get back on track. She actually suggested they give him extended leave to deal with his emotional difficulties." The idea that Ryan was the one with emotional difficulties was almost funny. But then Maya dropped the real news. His partners are not happy. Word is, they're reconsidering his track toward promotion. Apparently, they don't appreciate family interference in professional matters. That did get my attention. Ryan had been working toward a senior partnership for 2 years. It was everything to him. Status? Money. Validation from Portland's architectural establishment. If Victoria's meddling was jeopardizing that, she might have damaged her own son while trying to protect him from me. My new work was more fulfilling than anything I'd done before. The community clinic served families who'd been underserved by traditional healthcare, and many of our patients had stories similar to mine, people who'd been made to feel less than by systems designed to exclude them. "You really listen," said Mrs. Rodriguez during a routine cleaning. "The other dentist I went to, he made me feel stupid for not knowing about gum disease. You explain things so I can understand." It was the kind of recognition I'd craved from the Hammond family, but had never received. Here, my working-class background wasn't something to overcome. It was an asset that helped me connect with patients who'd been dismissed by other healthcare providers. Dr. Sarah Chen, who ran the clinic, noticed my approach with patients and started assigning me to the more complex cases. People dealing with dental anxiety, families navigating insurance issues, patients who'd had bad experiences elsewhere. "You have a gift for making people feel safe," she told me during my 3-month review. "That's not something you can teach. It comes from understanding what it feels like to be judged unfairly." 6 weeks later, the second crack appeared. Mrs. Whitman mentioned during a board meeting that she'd heard concerning gossip about Victoria at her book club. "Several families have been declining the Hammonds' invitations lately," she said carefully. There's been talk about Victoria's behavior at social events. People are questioning her approach to conflict resolution. I tried to look appropriately surprised, but inside I was fascinated. Victoria's entire identity was built on her position in Portland society. If that was cracking, she must be desperate. The third crack came from an unexpected source. I was grocery shopping when I literally ran into Claire, Ryan's sister. She looked exhausted, like she hadn't slept in weeks. "Bella," she said, and for a moment I thought she might actually flee. "How are you?" "I'm well," I said honestly. "You look tired." Claire's composure cracked slightly. "Things have been difficult lately. The family is... Ryan isn't doing great." I waited, curious despite myself. "He wasn't promoted to partner," she said quietly. "The firm said he needed to demonstrate better professional judgment before they'd consider him again." "I'm sorry to hear that." "It's not just the promotion. Mom has been..." Claire stopped herself, seeming to remember who she was talking to. "She's been trying to fix things, but she's making everything worse." I could see Claire realizing what she just admitted, that Victoria's attempts to help were backfiring. "Claire, I hope your family can work things out. But I need you to know, I'm not interested in being part of whatever's happening. I've moved on." Claire nodded quickly. "I know, I wanted you to know that not everyone agreed with what happened at Christmas." After she hurried away, I found myself thinking about the conversation. The Hammond family was falling apart, not because of anything I'd done, but because their toxic dynamics were finally catching up with them. 2 weeks later, Dr. Chen asked me to take on additional responsibilities, training new hygienists and developing patient education programs. It was a promotion that came with increased pay and recognition within Portland's healthcare community. "I'm recommending you for the Community Health Leadership Program," she told me. "It's a year-long certification that would qualify you to run programs like ours. Interested?" The opportunity felt like validation that I was building something meaningful with my life, not trying to impress anyone or gain access to exclusive circles, but actually making a difference for people who needed advocates. That evening, Maya called with more Hammond family updates. "Ryan's sister Claire apparently had a breakdown at some charity luncheon," she reported. "Started crying when someone mentioned Christmas party planning. Word is the whole family is in counseling now." "Good," I said. And I meant it. They need professional help to deal with their dysfunction. Aren't you even a little satisfied that they're suffering? I thought about the question seriously. A year ago, I would have been thrilled to hear about the Hammond family's problems. But now, focused on meaningful work and healthy relationships, their drama felt irrelevant to my life. "I'm satisfied that I'm not part of their chaos anymore," I said. "Their suffering doesn't make me happy, but their happiness doesn't affect me either." The final crack came in the form of a phone call to the clinic. I answered, expecting a patient or partner organization. "Eastside Community Health. This is Bella." "Bella Collins?" The voice was familiar but strained. "Yes, this is Bella. How can I help you?" "This is Ryan. I know you blocked my personal number, but I needed to talk to you." My blood went cold. After months of peace, the last thing I wanted was to be dragged back into Hammond family drama. "Ryan, I can't have personal conversations at work, and I thought I made it clear that I'd moved on." "I know, and I respect that. But there's something you need to know about my mother. Something that affects you directly." Against my better judgment, I was intrigued. "What do you mean? Can we meet somewhere?" "Just coffee, public place, 1 hour. There are things happening that you should be aware of." Every instinct told me to hang up, but something in Ryan's voice, fear, maybe, or desperation, made me pause. "Fine. The coffee shop on Division and 30th. Tomorrow at noon. 1 hour, Ryan. Then I never want to hear from your family again." After I hung up, I sat staring at the phone, wondering what new drama the Hammond family could possibly drag me into now. I'd built a good life, free from their toxicity. Whatever Ryan wanted to tell me, I was strong enough now to handle it without getting pulled back into their dysfunction. But I had no idea how deep Victoria's obsession with me had actually gone. Ryan was already seated when I arrived at the coffee shop, looking nervous and disheveled. Up close, I could see that the family stress was taking its toll. His usually perfect appearance was wrinkled and tired, like he'd been carrying the weight of the world. "Thank you for coming," he said as I sat down across from him. "I wasn't sure you would. I almost didn't. You have 1 hour, Ryan. Make it count." He nodded and pulled out his phone, scrolling to what looked like photos of documents. "What I'm about to tell you is going to sound paranoid, but my mother has been investigating you." "What do you mean?" "Investigating?" Ryan slid his phone across the table. On the screen was what looked like a background check. My full name, current address, employment history, even my credit report summary. "She hired someone to look into your background," Ryan said quietly, "about a month after the Christmas party. She's been gathering information about your family, your finances, your work history. I scrolled through the document, feeling sick. It was incredibly detailed, but seemed to stick to publicly available information. Employment records, address history, education background. Why? I asked, though I was afraid I already knew the answer. Because she can't let it go, Ryan said bluntly. The party didn't end things for her. It started something. She's become obsessed with proving that you're somehow dangerous to our family's reputation. The coffee shop suddenly felt too small, too exposed. Dangerous how? Ryan pulled up another photo on his phone. She's been calling around, asking questions about your character and work ethic. She contacted your previous employer, claiming she was verifying information for a potential job reference. My hands started trembling. Dr. Chen hadn't mentioned receiving any calls, but that didn't mean Victoria hadn't tried other approaches. There's more, Ryan continued. She's been spreading stories in her social circles, trying to damage your reputation. She told the women's auxiliary at the country club that you were some kind of opportunist who targets successful families. That's ridiculous. It gets worse. She's convinced that you recorded conversations at the Christmas party and are planning to use them against our family somehow. She's actually consulted with lawyers about harassment laws. I stared at Ryan in shock. Harassment laws? I haven't contacted any of you since that night. I know that. You know that. But my mother has created this elaborate story where you're plotting some kind of revenge campaign. She's shown people evidence that you've been following family members. What evidence? Ryan looked embarrassed. Claire saw you at the grocery store a few weeks ago and mentioned it to Mom. Somehow that became proof that you were stalking the family. The absurdity would have been funny if it weren't so frightening. Ryan, why are you telling me this? Why should I trust anything you say? He was quiet for a long moment, staring into his coffee. Because I'm ashamed, he finally said. I watched my mother humiliate you at that party, and I did nothing. I've watched her try to destroy your reputation for months, and I've stayed silent. I can't do it anymore. What changed your mind? She went too far. Last week, she called the state dental board and filed a complaint, claiming you were practicing without proper supervision or credentials. My stomach dropped. My professional license was everything. Without it, I couldn't work in my field. Don't panic, Ryan said quickly, seeing my reaction. The complaint was completely baseless and they dismissed it immediately. But Bella, she's not going to stop. She sees you as some kind of threat to our family's entire existence. I took a deep breath, trying to process everything he'd told me. What exactly are you asking me to do with this information? Protect yourself, Ryan said simply. Document everything. Maybe consider getting legal advice. What she's doing isn't just wrong. Some of it might be illegal. And you'd testify to that? Ryan nodded. I've been keeping copies of things. Screenshots of her research. Records of the calls she's made. I can't watch her destroy an innocent person's life just because she can't handle being challenged. I studied his face, looking for signs that this was some new manipulation, but Ryan just looked tired and guilty. Why would you turn against your own mother? Because she's not the person I thought she was, Ryan said quietly. The social climbing, the status obsession, I thought that was just how she was raised. But this campaign against you has shown me something darker. She's using our family's money and connections to systematically harm someone who never did anything wrong. I sat back in my chair, overwhelmed. For months, I'd been building a new life, moving forward, healing from the Hammond family's toxicity. Now I was learning that Victoria had been working behind the scenes to sabotage everything I'd built. There's something else you should know, Ryan said. She's been making calls to local reporters, trying to interest them in a story about social climbing and family manipulation. She wants to make you some kind of public example. Reporters, she wants to control the narrative. Make herself look like a victim of social manipulation instead of someone who publicly humiliated a person for sport. Ryan shook his head. The irony is that she's spent more money trying to destroy you than most people make in a year. I looked at the evidence on his phone again, feeling a familiar anger building inside me. The same fury that had given me strength at the Christmas party was rising again, but this time it felt more focused, more strategic. Ryan, I said slowly, what exactly do you think I should do with this information? Fight back, he said without hesitation. She's abusing her position and resources to harm an innocent person. People need to know what she's really like. I thought about Dr. Chen, who'd given me opportunities based on my character and competence. I thought about my patients at the clinic, who trusted me with their health care. I thought about the new life I'd built, based on authenticity rather than performance. Victoria Hammond had already taken enough from me. She wasn't taking anything else. All right, Ryan, I said, pulling out my own phone. Let's talk about what fighting back actually looks like. But we do this my way, not yours. What do you think will happen next? Will Bella take legal action, or does she have something else in mind? Drop your predictions in the comments below, and don't forget to hit that subscribe button if you're invested in seeing how this unfolds. The meeting with Ryan changed my perspective, but not in the way he expected. Walking home from that coffee shop, I felt the familiar weight of Hammond family drama trying to settle on my shoulders again, and I realized something important. I didn't want to fight Victoria on her terms. Spending months gathering evidence, hiring lawyers, engaging in a public battle with a wealthy socialite, that would mean letting her consume my life again. She'd already stolen 8 months of my happiness when I was dating Ryan. I wasn't giving her any more of my time or energy. Instead, I called Dr. Chen and told her everything Ryan had revealed. Her response was swift and professional. "We'll handle this appropriately," she said. "I'll contact our legal counsel and make sure proper protections are in place for you in our clinic. But Bella, I want you to focus on your work and your patients, not on Victoria Hammond's personal issues." That phrase, personal issues, stuck with me, because that's what this was, really. A wealthy woman so threatened by a dental hygienist that she'd hired investigators and filed false complaints. When you stripped away the money and social status, it was just sad. Mrs. Whitman had a different perspective when I told her what was happening. "You know what the best response is to people like that?" she said. "Excellence. Keep doing outstanding work. Keep helping people. Keep building the life you want. Her hatred can't touch that." She was right. Over the next few weeks, I threw myself into work with renewed energy. The Community Health Leadership Program was more challenging than I'd expected, but it was expanding my understanding of healthcare systems and policy. I was learning to think beyond individual patient care toward community-wide solutions. Meanwhile, the Hammond family continued their downward spiral without any help from me. Through Maya's neighborhood network, I heard that Ryan was seeing a therapist and had been given a final warning at his architectural firm. Claire had started avoiding family events entirely, according to Mrs. Whitman's social circle updates. And Victoria? Victoria was becoming increasingly isolated as more people learned about her behavior. Not because of anything I did, but because she couldn't stop herself from making the same mistakes over and over again. The turning point came 2 months after my meeting with Ryan. I was at the Saturday farmers market when I saw her. Victoria Hammond, standing alone at a flower stand, looking smaller and more fragile than I'd ever seen her. For a moment, I considered walking the other way, but something made me approach her instead. "Hello, Victoria," I said quietly. She turned, and I saw something in her eyes I'd never seen before. Genuine fear. "Bella," she whispered. How are you?" "I'm well," I said honestly. "I hear you've been asking about me." Victoria's composure cracked. "I don't know what you mean. The background checks? The calls to employers? The complaint to the licensing board?" I kept my voice calm and even. "Ryan told me everything, Victoria." She looked around nervously, as if checking to see who might be listening. "Ryan doesn't understand the situation. You don't understand what your actions have done to my family." "What actions exactly?" "You've destroyed my son's career prospects. You've damaged our family's standing in the community. You've created chaos where there used to be stability." Her voice was rising, drawing looks from other shoppers. I stared at her for a long moment and suddenly I saw the truth clearly. Victoria Hammond, for all her wealth and social status, was fundamentally broken. She'd spent so much time controlling and manipulating others that she'd lost the ability to take responsibility for her own choices. "Victoria," I said gently, "I haven't contacted your family since the night of your Christmas party. I haven't spoken to Ryan except when he reached out to me. I haven't told anyone about what happened except my closest friends. But Ryan's career? Ryan is dealing with the consequences of his own choices," I interrupted. "Just like you are. Just like we all are." Victoria's eyes filled with tears, and for a moment she looked like a lost child instead of a powerful socialite. "I don't know how to fix this," she whispered. It was the first honest thing she'd ever said to me. "You can start by stopping," I said. "Stop the investigation. Stop the phone calls. Stop the complaints. Let me live my life, and you focus on repairing your relationships with your children." "But what if people keep talking? What if the story spreads?" I almost laughed. Even in her moment of vulnerability, Victoria was more concerned about her reputation than about the actual harm she'd caused. "Victoria, the only person still talking about that Christmas party is you. Most people moved on months ago. The only reason it keeps coming up is because you keep bringing it up." She stared at me like this was a revelation. "Here's what's going to happen," I continued. "You're going to stop investigating me, stop calling my employers, and stop spreading stories about me. In return, I'm not going to take legal action, and I'm not going to share the evidence Ryan gave me with any reporters or social media." Victoria nodded quickly. "Yes, okay. I can do that." "Good. Because, Victoria, I'm happy now. I have work I love, colleagues who respect me, and a life built on authentic relationships. You can't destroy that because it's not built on the things you understand how to attack. I turned to walk away, then paused. And Victoria, get some help. This obsession isn't healthy, and it's destroying what's left of your relationships with your children. As I walked back to my car, I felt lighter than I had in months. Not because I'd won some victory over Victoria Hammond, but because I'd finally understood something crucial. Her opinion of me had never mattered. Her approval had never been worth seeking. Her hatred couldn't diminish my worth. 3 days later, Ryan called to tell me that Victoria had agreed to stop all investigation and harassment activities. "How did you do it?" he asked, sounding amazed. "I reminded her that I was never actually her enemy," I said. "I was just a convenient target for years of her own dysfunction." "She's agreed to family therapy," Ryan said. "All of us together. Claire's idea, actually." "That's good. I hope it helps your family heal." "Bella, I know this sounds strange, but thank you for handling this better than any of us deserved, for not destroying her when you could have." After I hung up, I realized something important. The Hammond family's problems were never really about me. I was just the convenient scapegoat for years of toxic patterns and unhealthy dynamics. Victoria's need to control everything, Ryan's inability to stand up to his mother, the family's obsession with appearances over authenticity, none of that had anything to do with whether I was good enough for their world. I had been good enough all along. I just hadn't been able to see it while I was trying so hard to prove it to people whose opinions didn't matter. The real victory wasn't that Victoria backed down, it was that I'd built a life so authentic and fulfilling that her attacks couldn't touch what really mattered to me. 6 months after my encounter with Victoria at the farmer's market, I was promoted to Community Health Program Coordinator at the clinic. The promotion came with a significant salary increase and the opportunity to design new outreach initiatives from the ground up. For the first time in my adult life, I was making enough money to feel truly secure while doing work that actually mattered. The dental access program I'd helped develop was serving over 500 patients in its first year, and we were getting calls from other cities asking us to consult on similar programs. I'd been invited to speak at 2 regional healthcare conferences, and a professional journal had asked me to write an article about treating underserved populations with dignity. "You should be proud of what you've accomplished," Dr. Chen told me during my annual review. "When Mrs. Whitman first recommended you, I could see you had potential, but I never imagined you'd develop into such a natural program leader so quickly." It was ironic how life had worked out. Victoria's attempt to humiliate me had led to the job that completely changed my trajectory. If she hadn't staged that cruel Christmas party performance, I might never have met Mrs. Whitman, never discovered work that truly fulfilled me, never found my authentic voice and confidence. My personal life had transformed too. I'd started dating again. Nothing serious yet, but healthy connections with people who valued my intelligence and independence. I'd made new friends through work and community activities, people who shared my values and didn't care about my social pedigree. I'd also reconnected with old friends I'd neglected during my relationship with Ryan. It turned out that trying to become someone else had required me to distance myself from people who knew who I really was. Getting back to my authentic self meant rebuilding those genuine relationships. That's why I was completely unprepared for the phone call I received on a Tuesday morning in early fall. "Bella? This is Ryan." I nearly dropped the phone. It had been over a year since I'd heard his voice, and hearing it now brought back a flood of memories. Not all of them painful anymore. "Hello, Ryan," I said carefully. "How did you get my work number?" "Dr. Chen's office is listed publicly. I hope that's okay. I needed to talk to you." Something in his voice made me pause. He sounded different, quieter, more thoughtful than the confident architect I'd known. "What do you need to talk about?" "I want to apologize for all of it. For the Christmas party, for not standing up to my mother, for being a coward when you needed me to be brave." I was quiet for a long moment, processing his words. "Ryan, it's been over a year. Why now?" "Because I've been in therapy, individual and family counseling, and I'm finally understanding how badly I failed you. How badly my whole family failed you." He paused. "And because I heard about your promotion and the work you're doing with the community health program. I'm proud of you, Bella. I always knew you were capable of great things." The words should have felt validating, but instead they made me slightly irritated. "You knew I was capable of great things, but you were ashamed to bring me to family dinner?" "Yes," he said simply. "And that says everything about who I was then, and nothing about who you are." His honesty was surprising. The Ryan I'd known would have made excuses or tried to minimize his behavior. "I'm not calling to ask for anything," he continued. "I'm not trying to reconcile or make excuses. I just needed you to know that I understand what I lost, and why I lost it." "How are you doing?" I asked, despite myself. "Better. Different. I left the old firm and started my own practice focusing on affordable housing development. It pays less than corporate architecture, but it feels more meaningful. I'm not trying to impress anyone anymore. And your family? We're still working on it in therapy. It's difficult, but necessary. My mother has stepped back from most of her social commitments to focus on her mental health. Claire and I are both doing better. We're slowly learning how to be a family instead of a performance. I found myself genuinely glad to hear that they were addressing their problems. Toxic family dynamics hurt everyone involved, and breaking those patterns took real courage. That's good, Ryan. I'm happy you're finding healthier ways to connect with each other. There's something else, he said. Something I need you to know, even though it doesn't change anything. What? My mother's behavior after our breakup. The investigation, the harassment attempts, all of it. That wasn't just her being controlling. She was having a genuine mental health crisis. She'd been struggling with anxiety and obsessive thoughts for years, but losing her social standing after the Christmas party triggered something much worse. I absorbed this information carefully. It explained Victoria's escalating behavior, but it didn't excuse it. I'm not telling you this to make excuses for her, Ryan continued, as if reading my thoughts. What she did was wrong, regardless of her mental state. But I wanted you to know that she's getting professional help now. Real help. And she asked me to tell you that she's deeply sorry for everything she put you through. She asked you to tell me that? She wanted to contact you directly, but her therapist thought it would be inappropriate, less likely to seem manipulative or create unwanted contact. I appreciated the therapist's wisdom. Direct contact from Victoria would have been unwelcome, but hearing that she was taking responsibility and getting help felt healing somehow. Thank you for telling me, I said. I hope she continues to get the support she needs. Bella? Ryan's voice was hesitant. Would it be okay if I asked you something? You can ask. Are you happy? Really? Genuinely happy? I thought about the question seriously. Was I happy? I was successful in meaningful work, financially secure, surrounded by people who valued my authentic self. I was confident in who I was and what I had to offer the world. Yes, I said. I am genuinely happy. Good, Ryan said, and I could hear the smile in his voice. That's all I wanted to know. After we hung up, I sat in my office thinking about the strange journey that had brought me to this point. 18 months ago, I'd been humiliated at a Christmas party, wearing a borrowed dress, trying desperately to prove I belonged in a world that would never have accepted the real me. Now I was building my own world, filled with people who appreciated my authentic self and work that actually mattered. I was using skills I'd developed rather than hiding who I was. The funny thing was, I actually was grateful to Victoria Hammond. Not for the cruelty, that was unforgivable, but for the clarity. Her Christmas party performance had forced me to confront uncomfortable truths about the relationship I'd been settling for and the person I'd been pretending to be. Sometimes the worst thing that happens to you turns out to be exactly what you need to save yourself from a life that would never have made you truly happy. The call that changed everything came on a Thursday morning in November, almost 2 years after Victoria's Christmas party. I was reviewing applications for our expanded mobile clinic program when Dr. Chen knocked on my office door, holding a letter with an expression I couldn't quite read. Bella, she said carefully, there's something you need to see. The letterhead read Hammond Family Foundation in elegant script. Below it was a formal proposal for a partnership between their foundation and our community health clinic, offering substantial funding to expand our mobile dental program throughout Portland's underserved communities. They want to give us money? I asked, staring at the document. Dr. Chen sat down across from my desk. It's a legitimate proposal. The funding would allow us to serve 3 times as many patients and add mental health services to our mobile units. I read through the proposal carefully. It was professional, well-researched, and would genuinely transform our ability to help people who needed healthcare access. But it was also signed by Victoria Hammond as foundation president. Did they mention me specifically in any conversations? Victoria called personally to make the initial proposal. She said she hoped you would be involved in program design, given your expertise in community outreach. Dr. Chen paused. She also said she understood if you preferred not to work with anything connected to her family. I leaned back in my chair, trying to process this information. It felt like another manipulation, another attempt by Victoria to insert herself into my life, but it also felt different somehow. Less about control and more about, what? Genuine community service? What do you think? I asked Dr. Chen. I think people can change, she said carefully. I also think we can't let personal history prevent us from helping people who need health care. The question is whether you're comfortable with this arrangement. That afternoon, I called Mrs. Whitman to get her perspective on the Hammond Family Foundation and their recent activities. Oh, they've been quite active in community service lately, she said. Victoria has stepped back from her social leadership roles and redirected the foundation toward actual community needs, rather than high society galas. It's been a dramatic shift. And this is legitimate? Not some kind of image rehabilitation project? Both, probably, Mrs. Whitman said honestly. But does it matter if the result is that more people get healthcare they wouldn't otherwise receive? She had a point. I'd learned enough about community healthcare to know that funding was always the biggest obstacle to serving people who needed help. If the Hammond family wanted to contribute to that mission, maybe their motivations were less important than the outcome. That evening, I called Maya to get her typically direct perspective. They want to give you money to help people get dental care, she said after I'd explained the situation. And you're hesitating because… Why exactly? Because it's the Hammond family. Because Victoria spent months trying to destroy my reputation. Because this feels like another attempt to manipulate me. Or, Maya said, maybe it's a wealthy woman trying to make amends for being horrible to you by supporting work she knows you care about. You think I should take the money? I think you should decide whether you can work with them professionally without getting pulled back into their personal drama. You've already proven you don't need their approval to succeed. The next morning, I made my decision. I called Dr. Chen and told her I was open to exploring the partnership, with strict professional boundaries and clear agreements about program control. I want to be involved in designing the program, I said, but I want it understood that this is a business relationship. No personal involvement with family members, no social obligations, no attempts to repair personal relationships through professional collaboration. Of course, Dr. Chen agreed. And Bella, I'm impressed that you can separate your personal experience from the opportunity to help more people. That takes real maturity. 2 weeks later, I found myself in a conference room at the Hammond Family Foundation offices, presenting my proposal for an integrated mobile health program. The room was filled with foundation board members and healthcare consultants, all taking notes and asking detailed questions about implementation and sustainability. Victoria sat at the far end of the table, looking different than I remembered. She was older, more tired, but also somehow more genuine than the perfectly polished woman I'd known. When she spoke, she addressed me professionally, respectfully, without any of the condescension I remembered from our previous interactions. The dental access component is particularly important, she said during the discussion. Too many people avoid necessary care because of cost or accessibility issues. This program could address real barriers. At the end of the presentation, Victoria asked if she could speak with me privately for a moment. Dr. Chen nodded, and the other attendees filed out of the room. Bella, Victoria said once we were alone, I want you to know that this partnership is not an attempt to repair our personal relationship. What I did to you was wrong, and no amount of charitable giving will change that. I waited for her to continue. I'm supporting this work because my therapist helped me understand that I've spent years using my privilege to exclude and hurt people instead of helping them. I want to spend whatever time I have left using that privilege constructively. Why tell me this? Because I need you to know that you don't owe me forgiveness or friendship or anything else personal. This is about the work, not about us. If working with the foundation becomes uncomfortable for you at any point, you can step back, and the funding will continue. I studied her face, looking for signs of manipulation or hidden agenda. But Victoria just looked tired and honest. Thank you for saying that, I said. I think we can work together professionally. Good, because your program design is excellent, and you're the right person to lead this expansion. As I left the foundation offices that day, I realized something important. I wasn't the same person who'd been humiliated at that Christmas party. That woman had been seeking validation from people who couldn't give it. This woman was confident enough in her own worth to work with former adversaries if it meant helping more people. Victoria Hammond's opinion of me still didn't matter, but her foundation's resources? Those could change lives. Sometimes the best revenge really is living well. And sometimes, if you live well enough for long enough, even your former enemies become willing to support your success. The integrated mobile health program launched 6 months later to tremendous community response. What had started as a partnership I'd approached with skepticism became one of the most rewarding projects of my career. The Hammond Family Foundation's funding allowed us to serve over 1,500 patients in our first year, providing dental care, basic medical services, and mental health screenings to families who'd been underserved for years. You've created something special here, Dr. Martinez, our new program psychiatrist, told me during one of our planning meetings. The way you've designed this program, it treats people with dignity first, then addresses their healthcare needs. That's not how most systems work. The recognition felt meaningful because it came from colleagues who understood the complexity of community healthcare. These weren't people trying to impress me or gain something from me. They were professionals who shared my commitment to serving people who'd been overlooked by traditional healthcare systems. My role had evolved into something I'd never imagined when I'd started as a dental hygienist. I was now Community Health Program Director, overseeing multiple initiatives and consulting with organizations in other cities that wanted to replicate our model. The work challenged me intellectually while staying connected to the hands-on patient care that had originally drawn me to healthcare. But perhaps more importantly, I'd learned to trust my own judgment about people and situations. Working with the Hammond Family Foundation had taught me that I could maintain professional relationships even with people who'd hurt me personally, as long as clear boundaries were established and respected. Victoria and I interacted regularly through foundation meetings, but our relationship remained strictly professional. She treated me with appropriate respect, and I reciprocated with competent program management. Neither of us pretended that we were friends, but we'd found a way to collaborate effectively on work that mattered. That's why I was surprised when Dr. Chen mentioned that Victoria had specifically requested a meeting with me about expanding the program into rural communities. She has an interesting proposal, Dr. Chen said. Something about using the foundation's connections to establish permanent clinics in smaller towns outside Portland. The meeting was scheduled for a Thursday afternoon at the foundation offices. Victoria was waiting in the same conference room where we'd first discussed the mobile clinic partnership, but this time we were alone. "Thank you for making time for this," she said as I took a seat across from her. "I have a proposal that I think could significantly expand the impact of your work." She slid a folder across the table. Inside were detailed plans for establishing 3 permanent community health clinics in rural Oregon towns, each modeled on our successful Portland program. "The foundation has been approached by several small communities that desperately need healthcare access," Victoria explained. "These are towns where the nearest dentist might be an hour away, where families go years without basic preventive care because of distance and cost." I reviewed the proposal carefully. It was ambitious but well-researched, with realistic budgets and implementation timelines. The foundation was offering to fund startup costs for 3 clinics, with the goal of making them self-sustaining within 5 years. "This would require someone to oversee the entire network," I said, seeing where the conversation was heading. "We'd like that someone to be you," Victoria confirmed. "Regional Director of Community Health Services. It would mean more responsibility, more travel, but also the opportunity to bring healthcare access to communities that have been completely underserved." The offer was tempting,